Chris Deluzio, Democrat for Congress in Pennsylvania's District 17. Why are you running for this office?
Well, I'm running for re-election, asking folks for their votes to keep doing the good and important work I've been doing as our congressman representing us in Western Pennsylvania down in Washington. I entered Congress bringing the values I learned growing up in my district, that I learned in my time in uniform, leading Americans at sea in Iraq. The values I take to this job, I often point back to a motto I first learned at the Naval Academy: ship, shipmate, self. You put the mission, the country first, you put others before yourself. That's how I do this job. And despite some chaos and dysfunction that I've experienced because of the Republican majority that I serve with in Washington, I've gotten a lot done for this region. We've seen more than $2 billion of federal money come home to our district. My team and I have helped more than 2,000 of my constituents cut through federal agencies and get back $5 million they were owed. And I've been taking on some big fights like rail safety, standing up to big, powerful railroads who are trying to block common sense rail safety reform to keep my constituents safe. And of course, I'm doing the hard work to defend our freedom from price gouging and to have strong jobs, freedom from these right-wing abortion attacks, and freedom that our democracy is strong. That's the job, and I'm asking folks for 2 more years to keep on doing it.
And Congressman, we're going to talk about some of those topics shortly, but first, for the benefit of our viewers statewide, which part of Pennsylvania makes up District 17?
Well, I have the best congressional district in the country. I'm here in Western Pennsylvania. My district is all of Beaver County, and about half of the people in Allegheny County. I surround the city of Pittsburgh in many directions, really every direction but the southeast. And it's got a mix of near city neighborhoods. It's got factory towns, traditional suburbs, farms, and kind of everything in between. It's a great district.
What have your main legislative priorities been since you were elected to District 17 in 2022?
Well, when the derailment happened in East Palestine, just across the border to our neighbors in Ohio, many of my Beaver County constituents were within the evacuation zone. Certainly many worried about their safety and their health. And so I've been leading the fight in the House to pass rail safety legislation, working in the House. My Republican co-lead has been a Republican fellow Naval Academy graduate from New York. And of course, in the Senate, our senators, Casey and Fetterman, working with their Ohio counterparts, Senator Vance, Senator Brown, to pass rail safety reform. It's been a major priority of mine. I've been doing a lot to try to grow good, solid jobs in this country, manufacturing jobs. Senator Fetterman and I have a pretty strong Make Stuff Here agenda about better trade deals, growing union apprenticeships and job opportunities, and incentivizing domestic manufacturing. I've been trying to protect our freedom. And to me, that is about reproductive and abortion rights. That's about strengthening our democracy. And I bring my work as a voting rights lawyer to that important work for our government.
Congressman, you mentioned rail safety a minute ago, so refresh us on the train wreck that happened in East Palestine, Ohio, near the Pennsylvania border. That was a couple years ago, and what were the consequences of that?
Yeah, it happened, I think I've been in Congress about a month or so in East Palestine, just along the border with Pennsylvania and my constituents in Beaver County. The Norfolk Southern train derailed. Folks saw all over the country on the news the toxic fireball that spewed into the sky. And we've since learned, or we knew for quite a while, the derailment happened because of this railroad's greed and incompetence. But what we learned through the National Transportation Safety Board, that's the NTSB, we learned that the vent and burn, the thing that led to that toxic fireball spewing chemicals across our region and our neighbors in Ohio, that didn't have to happen. And in fact, what the NTSB told us was that Norfolk Southern and its contractors actually misled and forced that decision on the incident commander on the ground, the first responders and others leading the cleanup. That put my constituents and our neighbors at risk. I found that unacceptable. I sent a letter off to the Attorney General calling for a full federal criminal investigation, and I continue to push for rail safety legislation that we finally have some momentum on. The Republican leadership in the House has not been supportive, but I've been working with everyone from ultra MAGA conservatives, liberals, moderates, you name it. We finally have some movement with even the rail subcommittee chairman, a Republican, a pretty conservative Republican, working with me and others to get this bill passed. That's my job. My job is to find a coalition wherever I can to deliver for things that matter to my constituents.
And tell us more, Congressman, what is in the rail safety bill that you're working on that was influenced directly by this train wreck in Ohio?
Well, we even made some changes to incorporate and respond to the NTSB's full findings about those wayside defect detectors that could have and should have detected the overheated bearing that led to the derailment, wheel bearing. The bill includes two-person minimum staffing, which should be such a no-brainer. I think most people think it's crazy that you could have one of these big, long trains carrying some toxic stuff that only has maybe one person staffing it. And to be fair, some of the railroads already have agreements with their unions to have more than one worker, not all. The bill importantly includes much stiffer fines for when these railroads break the rules, when they don't comply with the law. There are measures in there so that we can expand the definition of what a high hazard flammable train is, so that chemicals like vinyl chloride that were involved in the derailment in East Palestine actually trigger those stricter requirements that the trains operate more safely, communicate better with first responders, and a lot more.
Now, I understand you're on the Armed Services Committee, and what kind of work is on that committee's desk right now?
Well, we face substantial and significant challenges across the globe, excuse me. I think probably no more pressing than confronting and frankly countering the rise of communist China and their ambitions in the Indo-Pacific and frankly globally. And I think there's pretty strong bipartisan agreement in the Congress and in particular in the Armed Services Committee where I serve to make sure that our military is up to that task, that our defense industrial base is strong. I and others have been sounding the alarm that all of this consolidation, all of these mergers and acquisitions in the defense industrial base, which have happened, frankly, in a lot of our economy, and it's been bad for competition. But the defense industrial base, it's led to so few suppliers for so many things the military needs. We're all overpaying. We're finding quality issues. We're finding weapon systems, components, and parts not arriving on time. It's a real problem for our national security, especially when you compare it to the heavy subsidies and investments that China in particular has been making in their defense industrial base. We have to have a strong and vibrant and competitive one to meet the challenges of China and others, but also so that the public isn't overpaying for things that we need for our military.
Here's something else you're currently working on as a congressman. It's called the ProAct, and it addresses workers' rights. Tell us briefly what that's about.
Yeah. Look, the ProAct would basically level the playing field so that workers across this country, no matter state law, which varies quite a bit around your freedom to form or join a union, actually have the freedom to make those decisions on their own. A state like Pennsylvania does a pretty good job of protecting the freedom of workers to decide for themselves if they want to form a union. But many states, particularly in the South and the Sun Belt, it's really hard. The deck is stacked against workers who want it. The penalties for when companies union bust and break the law are pretty weak. And I think at the federal level, beyond just at the state level. And so the ProAct would, I think, level the playing field, hold violators of the law accountable when they do break the law, and give workers the freedom to decide for themselves, free of interference from management and supervisors and bosses, to make their own decision about whether they want to form and join a union and have the benefit of a union, which we know lifts all up, union and non-union workers. We know it raises wages and benefits where there are strong unions. We know that when unions were their strongest, our country's economic growth was robust. We had good job growth, and we frankly had folks being lifted up into the middle class because of the strong benefits of the labor movement and unions.
Get into campaign issues, Congressman. Let's consider your work experience before you were elected to this office in 2022. And you already touched on the fact that you were a lawyer. So tell us more about that line of work before you got into this office.
Yeah, I was working at the University of Pittsburgh at Pitt doing work around cybersecurity, defending our elections and voting rights, and became a lawyer in my time after the military. So I served as an officer in the Navy after graduating from the Naval Academy, and that service took me all over the world. I'm so proud of what my shipmates and I did for this country. My deployments were at sea and then on the ground in Iraq with an Army Civil Affairs unit. But I couldn't have been prouder of my service. And frankly, what I saw in uniform is people from every walk of life in this country who are committed to it, who understands that there is a mission bigger than all of us individually. and who would come together to accomplish the mission, whatever it might be. Uh, the people who step up to serve this country really tell you something about who we are and who we are in Western Pennsylvania, because I spent a lot of time all over my district. It's hard to find a family who doesn't have a picture of someone in uniform sometime in their family history. There's a proud legacy of service in this country.
How does your experience as a lawyer help inform your agenda as a congressman?
Well, we write legislation in the Congress. You got to understand the way these bills interact with each other. They interact with the current statutes on the books, the U.S. Code. You've got to anticipate the challenges that you might see in the courts. And frankly, you've got to be able to put together coalitions to pass bills, coalitions that pass amendments, to get language inserted to bills that pass. I serve on the Armed Services Committee, as we've talked about a little bit earlier. The defense bill is one of those big bills that we pass every Congress, typically very bipartisan way. In committee, the last 2 years that I've been there, I think we've only had one vote out of 50 or 60 or so of us on committee who supported the bill. And so you've got to be able to navigate that process to insert language and provisions and amendments, as I've been able to do, to get your priorities into law.
So now let's explore the issues that are occurring in this campaign. And certainly the economy and inflation are on everyone's mind. In short, what can Congress do?
Congress can do more. I've been taking on some of these junk fees that we've seen big, powerful corporations put on folks, everything from banking to travel to restaurants. The fundamental problem that I think the Congress really needs to step up on is so much consolidation across our economy, and we're paying for it, whether it's groceries or meat, you name it. I'll give you an example. I was with farmers in my district not too long ago, hearing about their concerns, and they were sharing problems they were experiencing with meat processors who have a lot of power. There's a lot of consolidation in industry. And when those meat processors are making it tough for a small farmer to get in, when they're dictating prices, it hurts those farmers and those small businesses, no doubt. It also hurts all of us. We pay more for their goods, for their products, for the meat that we're dealing with here. And so to see stronger and robust antitrust enforcement is about competition. It's about helping small businesses thrive. You look at any main street in my district, there are great small businesses, entrepreneurs taking risks. It's also about bringing costs down for the people who I represent, who want to see costs come down, who don't want to be ripped off. And I think this administration has taken some action that's been strong, but they need the Congress to fund the antitrust enforcers to pass good policies that promote competition, which is at the heart of American capitalism. That's how we succeed. When you can start a small business and go up against a corporate giant and hold your own and win and offer a service or a good that folks want, that folks will pay a decent price for, and that people can afford. That's my vision for this economy of ours.
When Hamas attacked Israel in 2023, how would you rate our government's handling of that situation right now?
Oh, look, the attacks were just so brutal. The suffering was terrible. I was with the Jewish community to mark the anniversary this year, and folks still feel that pain in such a raw way. And certainly the suffering we've seen since the fighting, Palestinian and Israeli, has just been brutal. I've one who's called for, of course, us supporting our friends in Israel and their defense against Hamas. And I've also called for restraint to protect civilian lives. I think if nothing else, the lessons we learned as Americans in the 20 years or so of wars in the Middle East was the imperative to protect non-combatants and civilians. And I know the diplomatic work continues, and I've called for and support a diplomatic end to the fighting, a ceasefire agreement that secures the release of hostages, that gets humanitarian aid in, and frankly makes it so that Hamas can never, ever level the kind of attack again they leveled against Israelis.
Here's another issue we're hearing about frequently during this campaign: abortion and reproductive rights. They're being debated during the campaign. What's your position?
I think women ought to have the freedom to make their own decisions about their health care and their pregnancy. I've been a strong supporter of abortion rights, contraception access, and the rest. And it's a real contrast in my race. My opponent, who served and serves in the state house here in Pennsylvania, Rob Mercuri, he supported and co-sponsored a really extreme abortion ban at 6 weeks before most women ever can even get an ultrasound, with no exceptions for rape or incest. He voted to amend the Constitution in Pennsylvania to make clear that no one in Pennsylvania has any right around abortion. It's extreme stuff. And it's one thing to have really extreme views that are not popular. It's quite another thing to then run away from them and lack the courage to stand by them. And I've seen him do that. It's too bad. Folks deserve better, I think, from their candidates and their elected officials.
Let's talk about security at our southern border. What action, if any, should be taken?
Well, there was a bipartisan deal that was hammered out between a really conservative Senator Lankford and the White House while I've been in Congress that I would have supported. I wrote an op-ed in the Tribune Review saying it was a tough but fair border security measure that we should have supported. And yet we saw politics get in the way. Former President Trump seemingly wanted to campaign on this issue and directed congressional Republicans to kill the deal. And I think that was a real disservice to this country to see my Republican counterparts do that. And yet we know that the best and only path to resolve problems at the southern border, to resolve problems in our immigration system, is a bipartisan deal that can work through the House and the Senate and earn the president's signature. I'm a co-sponsor of the Bipartisan Dignity Act, which takes on border security. It takes on problems in our visa and asylum system. It recognizes that folks who work hard, play by the rules, pay their taxes, don't commit crimes, can earn some pathway to have a normalized status in this country. That's what most people expect us to do. They want to have folks who can yearn for the American dream, like so many in this region have, actually earn it. They want to have security and order at our borders. I think the Congress has to get those things done.
Some campaign ads we see on TV address benefits for Social Security. And certainly our viewers want to know, how are these programs doing, and should any action be taken to protect these benefits?
Well, we should protect them, and then we should do more. These benefits are earned after a lifetime of hard work. No senior or no future retiree should expect that those benefits are ever cut. And certainly I'm not going to support those cuts when we know there are common sense, popular things we can do on the revenue side to shore up Social Security for generations to come. I'm supportive of legislation that would finally change the revenue side so that when a billionaire stops paying their taxes towards Social Security at around $180,000, well, that should change. I don't think a billionaire and someone who makes $180,000 should pay the same towards Social Security. I think the billionaire should pay a little bit more. And I think most people understand that that is fundamentally in an unjust system, and that if we took that basic action, and there's legislation I'm supporting that does that, we will shore up Social Security for decades and decades to come, so that those hard-earned benefits, are there for current and future retirees, which that's all of us.
Let's consider energy at this point, Congressman. And with an eye on the future, what should Pennsylvania's energy portfolio look like?
It's all the above, and we've been an energy leader, right? Of course, the natural gas industry is important and strong in my part of the Commonwealth. I have jobs in the nuclear industry because of Shippingport, Beaver Valley Power Station. These are good, solid union jobs. We're powering not just the Commonwealth, but this country. And certainly I look across the Atlantic to some of our friends in Europe who were decarbonizing, but also getting rid of their nuclear reactors. And that was a big mistake. They found themselves, frankly, reliant on exports of oil or gas from Russia, funding the war machine of Vladimir Putin that then invaded their neighbors in Ukraine. And so I look at Pennsylvania as a place where we can lead the country, and we're solving the climate crisis with good, solid jobs. I'll give you an example. A formerly closed steel mill in my district, JM Steel, now opened, adding jobs. They're working on steel components for solar trackers, tracking the sun, helping us achieve our climate goals. They did it with the benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act. That's private investment, relying on a good bill, growing solid jobs. That's how we can, I think, be energy leaders and do an all of the above approach that is all about solid jobs around here.
Fracking is often emphasized during this campaign, Congressman, and so the question becomes, how do you balance jobs and a clean environment?
Well, I think it's a false choice, right? We can solve our energy, we can solve our climate crisis, we can be energy secure and independent, and we can have solid jobs. You know, the workers in the industries, in energy industries in our Commonwealth, across the board, those unions and those workers have endorsed me because they know that policies that are pro-worker, that are pro-energy, that are pro-clean air and water are good for all of us. And so when I talk about all of the above, that's really what I mean. We can have solid jobs in the energy industry, and we can invest in solving the climate crisis. Right now, there's a pending decision with the Treasury Department around one of the tax credits in the Inflation Reduction Act. Our industry around here is really excited. Our labor movement around here is really excited because if we get this right, our region can really benefit from the potential of hydrogen power and the different sources that could feed it. And so I've been advocating along with our senators and others to make sure that interpretation comes out in a way that is solid for jobs around here and is solid for us meeting our climate goals. And when you have environmental advocacy groups, workers, industry, all pushing to solve these problems, it tells you there's a path forward.
Let's circle back to your military experience. I understand you went to the Naval Academy, and what did you get out of that experience?
It was the best. It was tough. I have some of my favorite people in the world, my best friends I went through Annapolis with, and I learned some basic values around service to this country, discipline, hard work, and I take those throughout my life into this job. I mentioned at the beginning of the interview the motto, shipmate, self. You put the mission first, you put others before yourself. That is central to who I am. That is central to how I do this job, how my team is directed by me to do their duties. And I couldn't be prouder of my time in uniform, of the great responsibility it was to lead Americans as an officer, as a young officer. It was one of the most important things I ever decided to do as a 17-year-old, and was lucky enough to get to do, to go to the Naval Academy. And I left to go to Annapolis. I was a senior in high school when the 9/11 attacks happened. I mean, for me and so many who served around that time, it was such a defining moment for us, a call to service. And I answered that call, and I've never looked back. I've been so proud of my time in uniform.
Now, I understand you were deployed to Iraq. Tell us what you did there.
Yeah, I was a naval officer, and I was part of an Army Civil Affairs unit around 2009 or 10. And it was later, right, 5-6 years on from the invasion, so it was much later in the war. And a lot of the idea was to build up civil society, to support the Iraqis as they were going to take back over so much more control of their own destiny and government. And look, I learned some lessons about American power and its limits. I was a veteran, or I am a veteran of a war that I don't think our country should have fought. I think we should have had better decision making in Washington before you committed young people, young Americans, American dollars, American lives to invading a country like Iraq. And so I often talk about and connect my service to the job I have now. And one of the greatest responsibilities I will ever have is a vote on whether to send Americans to fight anywhere. I don't take that lightly. I tell people, and I've said it since I ran for office the first time, if I'm not willing to look you in the eye and tell you that your kids or your grandkids or you should risk your life, or that my children should risk their life, I'm not going to send you or your kids or your grandkids to go fight. That's my standard. If there's a fight we have to win, that's so important to national interest, I'll support it. But I'm never going to take that lightly, and I'm always going to be willing to be clear with folks about that standard and when I think it's appropriate, if ever, to commit young Americans to go fight.
After you were in the Navy, Congressman, did you come to a fork in the road? I'm interested to hear about your thinking after you left the Navy. Did you get into law? Were you thinking about politics at that point?
Yeah, I think like a lot of people, what I saw out of the 2016 election was really a wake-up call about, frankly, how fragile our democracy is, the risks that we could see, and what I saw with Mr. Trump as president, and frankly, what I saw at the end of his presidency, where he was willing to entice and incite supporters to invade the people's house, to invade the Capitol, to try to rip up our Constitution and overthrow the government. Those are pretty grave threats. And I get to spend a lot of time in rooms with Democrats, Republicans, independents, and everyone in between. There are good, patriotic, decent people all over this country, all over the political spectrum. Most people do not want to see political violence. They want to see a strong government. They want to see candidates fight on the issues and argue it out, concede when you lose, graciously accept that concession when you win, and then everyone goes and roots for our country to succeed. That's what folks want. That's what I want. But I know that there are threats, unfortunately, to our way of life, to our democracy, and I'm willing to do everything I can to hold the line to keep this country strong.
And along those lines, Congressman, as we're recording this interview on October 30th, here's a current headline. It has to do with PA House Republicans filing a lawsuit over ballots cast by service people. Tell us what's going on there.
Well, I've been very opposed to this effort, and to be clear, my Republican colleagues who filed the lawsuit, all of them voted against certifying the election. And to be even clearer, all of them thus were willing to throw out the votes of every Pennsylvanian in the 2020 presidential election. Fortunately, a judge has dismissed this lawsuit, but I cannot imagine being willing to attack the voting rights of overseas service members, deployed service members who are serving this country, perhaps in harm's way, all in some bad faith quest for power to sow doubt and confusion. It is the worst of things, and that is not who we are as Americans.
What do you see as the major distinction between you and your opponent in this race?
Well, look, the differences are pretty substantial. You know, I heard my opponent just last week. I heard Rob Mercuri be unwilling to even say that Donald Trump did not lose the 2020 election, unwilling to say that the election wasn't stolen from him. That's not just pathetic, it's quite dangerous, given what we saw on January 6th. And my opponent, Rob Mercuri, has been willing to support really extreme abortion bans without exceptions for rape or incest victims. You know, the very first endorsement Rob Mercuri took was from a powerful Koch-aligned group that is lobbying against my bill. They don't want guys like me to fight for our community and our safety. In fact, I guess they found a candidate in him willing to carry their water. I'm in the fight for my community and our safety for as long as it takes, no matter what they throw at me.
Only a minute left in our program, Congressman. Use that remaining time to tell our viewers why they should vote for you in District 17.
Well, it's been an honor to represent us these past 2 years. I've asked folks for their vote again and their trust in me again. I'm going to continue to do the hard and important work to serve this community and this country. My promise is a straightforward one: to always put all of us and this country of ours first. I will work with anyone of either party to do that. I'm so proud of the work that you've seen my caucus do, the 4-country caucus of veterans in both parties, showing us a way that in divided times, we really can put our country first, find some common ground, and deliver for the people of Western Pennsylvania.
Chris Deluzio, Democrat for Congress in Pennsylvania's District 17. Thank you.
Thank you.